welcome back, everybody, and delighted to welcome you back to the Reframing Film, Repertory Programming all year round. This session is, I think, in that first session, we heard of the ripple effect, or the ambition of the ripple effect, which is that festivals, a festival like Bologna, a festival like Edinburgh International Film Festival, can do a retrospective, can do the research for a retrospective that in Ersan was saying can take years to develop. But then what happens at a film festival is that it gives it a platform, and the film that was talked about, Black Tuesday, I think Christy said she saw, and what, I've never seen that film before, why don't I know about it, I want to put it on, and the relationship between those kinds of events, and say that, as we've described it, the ripple effect that has. We're going to find out, hopefully more in this session, how that ripple begins to realise itself in real life cinema situations. I'm looking at Paul because kind of running a venue all year round, a bit like ourselves, but this panel is looking at repertory programming. How do you get audiences? Primarily, I think is going to be the challenge and the question for us all going forward. But so I'm going to ask each member of the panel just talk more about the area that they are working in relationship to restorations and archives, and the sort of experiences of both getting an audience and also the kinds of partnerships, I guess, would be interesting to hear more about. And I just want to emphasise the point that we are all there's different scales of resources that are behind things. It's something that constantly strikes me, and that if you're a sort of single part-time venue, and you think, God, I really want to show that, but how do I get an audience for it? I think there's a really, that's where we kind of, for me, one of the things I want to get to is how do we get audiences that are further away from those centres of gravity to sort of engage with the kind of films and film culture that we all are enthusiastically celebrating over the next few days. So I'm going to go straight to Julie Pearce from the British Film Institute.
Yep.
To say just to say a bit kind of headlines through about the areas of rep programming and archive work that you do, and the kinds of ways in which it's presented and engaging audiences.
Yeah, I feel like a bit of an outlier in that respect, because obviously we do have resources. So I've held several different roles at the BFI. So at the moment I'm head of BFI distribution. And 2 or 3 years ago, what we decided to do, for example, Ingmar Bergman, and what else? Well, we've got Peter Greenaway coming up. When we have a big retrospective in South Bank, which is obviously, they're usually pretty meaty, if not complete, we want to try and make films available for the rest of the UK. So with the Bergman, I think we had 8 films touring around the UK, and we made new DCPs, and you guys really took us up on that offer, which was great. And we also had Blu-rays and DVDs there for non-theatrical screenings, so that worked well. So now going forward, we're trying to do 2 of these tours a year. So in October, November, we're doing a really big Peter Greenaway season. The archive have remastered The Draftsman's Contract, but we've taken opportunity as well to put together a little package. So for the first time on DCP in UK, there will be Belly of an Architect. We've picked up the Greenaway Alphabet, which is a lovely little film that was directed by his wife, and we've put that together with H for House. And what's the other, Phil, what's the other one? Z and 2 Noughts, exactly. So we've got a little Greenaway package. It's his 80th birthday. He's coming over to do some press. We hope he doesn't. We hope he doesn't kill himself on NFT stage, because he always said he'd kill himself at 80.
When he turned 80,
and he's 80 now. So keeping our fingers crossed.
Get some publicity.
Get some publicity. So that's something we're doing with the bigger retrospects at South Bank. We're just trying to make them available more widely. And I know Watershed, Glasgow, you sort of partake of them, and I hope you find it kind of useful. So, anything else?
I guess can you talk to the restorations side that you release through BFI distribution?
Yeah, so we have our own restorations that come out of the archive. Draftsman's Contract, we've got Nil by Mouth coming in the autumn. And when we're working on these restorations, we're also thinking about how we're going to roll these out. So we will be doing Gary Oldman in the autumn, and we are doing Peter Greenaway. We always try to support our own restorations. Aside from the archive restorations, we also have the kind of restorations, remasterings that we do for Blu-ray and DVD. So example of that is Get Carter. So all the time we're trying to strive to buy as many rights as we can to make it as widely available as we can. So
because the harder they harder they come.
The Harder They Come is coming out.
It's coming out
5th of August.
5th of August. So that would be how. Just give us an idea of how that would sort of bubble up, as it were.
Well, we started off with the reggae season, and then we thought, how come... So when you release something as part of the season, obviously it brings much more press and marketing ability to the season. So we had the reggae, The Harder They Come was sitting in there, and then you go, bing, oh, hang on, it's the 50th anniversary. So, not brain surgery, but we thought, right, so we spoke to the sales agent, and we realised that the copy they had actually wasn't great and the front credits were missing. So we kind of acquired it, we've cleaned it up, we've re-added the front credits, and then we're releasing it alongside the retrospective, but making it available around the UK. And we're still hoping that Jimmy Cliff might do a couple of interviews. He's in Miami, but we'll see how it goes.
Right.
So
So you're obviously also thinking about how you can maximise the publicity around it, around any season or release to kind of get that out wider.
Exactly.
Is a kind of key part built into
you know, so much work goes into putting these seasons together. It just seems mad just to keep them in London at the South Bank. We really want to break out of there if we can.
Sorry, anyway, sorry. Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. Yeah. So what I didn't say at the beginning was Wendy Cook is not here, but Wendy is actually here. Wendy has just arrived and is catching her breath. And if you, it's all right. No, just you. We'll work our way. We'll work our way around. So onto Isra from T.A.P.E Collective, which I'm guessing is going to be of a different order of scale than the British Film Institute.
Yeah,
so if you can,
but we work together.
We would do.
But exactly, together, and it is in these collaborations and partnerships that I think we begin to make a difference. So if you could just tell us a bit about the organisation, but some examples of practice of getting films, older films out there.
Sure. So we started 6 years ago as a teeny tiny collective. It was just me and my friend Angela Monike, and we found ourselves, we were both writing reviews for festivals or for outlets for free, and we were sort of attending festivals and not having our expenses covered or anything, and we found ourselves really trying to get into the film industry somehow. And then we did the usual thing that all film fans do, where they go, we should open a cinema, which everyone wants to do, I think. And that's how our conversation started, and that's how T.A.P.E started. We realised we weren't going to open a cinema anytime soon, but what we can do is that we can map out and dream up what it is that brings an audience like ourselves, which is essentially women of colour who are a bit younger in terms of trying to get into the industry and didn't have traditional training or degrees in film. What brings us to a cinema, and so the things that we were looking at is, there sort of was some conversation around representation, but in a very I don't think as evolved as it is now. The conversations about representation, I think, was very much like if you had a lead or if you had some sort of themes, there might be one diverse film released a year. We also thought about this creating the space for conversation, and also just where does that happen, and for us that worked in alternative spaces. So when we started, we didn't actually do screenings in cinemas because we were also young Barbican programmers. So we already had that at our disposal in terms of what we could do, but for T.A.P.E, we just wanted to do exactly what we wanted to do, which was cross arts, which meant that even from our first event, it was in a cafe, in the back room of a cafe. There was a curated playlist. It was like branded popcorn bags, which I'm amazed that we had that sort of organizational skill to do that for our first event. And we had our friends and sort of friends come and support us. And it was creating that space afterwards, before, between, afterwards, to have a conversation. And a lot of the conversation which continues is, I'd never seen that film before, or I've been meaning to see it, this is great. So we've been fortunate to be able to continue that. In the meantime, we've all sort of gotten real jobs in the film industry. So Angie's a film producer and I work in exhibition. And T.A.P.E was always just the sort of place that we dipped into when we wanted to do what we really wanted to do, where no one told us what we can and can't do. And very much just like the sort of audience we had in mind, again, is people like us who like film, who maybe as women of colour we've been pigeonholed into liking certain types of film. And actually the reality is that Angie and I are absolute just film nerds. We like old movies, we like Marvel movies, which back then was a bit cooler than it is now. There's all these sort of things that we felt like people didn't expect from us, but ultimately we're just sort of film nerds. Long story short, 2 years ago we decided we were like, T.A.P.E has survived for 4 or 5 years by us barely doing anything or trying. We're just sort of dipping into it when we feel like it. What if we really, really tried? So 2 years ago, we really, really tried, and we've sort of have grown quite a lot, and we've been able to work with putting together programs, BFI South Bank. We've gone on tour with various programs, and what we always return to, so we work both with short films and feature films. And it's not so much that we work with films that are sort of retrospectives, but it's more about, when we started, one of the key things was there are films out there, but they're just not getting the UK distribution. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try to think outside the box and maybe go against what the ideas people have about distribution and how you book a film. And we're just going to do one-off screenings of films that have had a really successful or sort of good response at festivals, but not been screened in cinemas and not had a proper UK release. And that's something that we're still doing.
And are you one of those films? Am I right? Is it Just Another Girl in the IRT?
Yes. Well, so basically, because we started off in South London, and part of this sort of growth and big scale thing of working with certain venues that were really serious cinema venues, we just had to have sort of a sense check of like, okay, we also now need to go back to the alternative spaces that we've been talking about. So that was an alternative space in Brixton, which hadn't really launched. They hadn't really done a screening, so we were the first one to do it. And Just Another Girl in the IRT is a film that we've been thinking about and dreaming about for a really long time, and it was sort of one of those. The thing that I guess where we're coming from is that there are so many great films there that, and this is also with the short films that we support, is like it's such a shame for that to disappear, and we're really sort of passionate about extending the life cycle for any film, and that there's nothing that there's nothing to say that film is 30 years old, we're done with it, or that only certain films can be celebrated for their 30th or 40th or 50th anniversary. We would love to do something more and bigger with Just Another Girl in IRT, but just really, glad that we managed to do that one screening because we've been trying for years.
It disappeared for about 20 years, but I think UCLA restored it, didn't they? So it's in better shape now.
Yeah, it's been. I think it's the 30th anniversary now, and Leslie Harris has been doing Q&As and stuff in America though.
Because we did it at Cinema Rediscovered and had Leslie over, and she brought the print, the only print, with it. And I mean, it had won, and I think this is a kind of point around how you can, festivals like ourselves and other events can foreground stuff is that Leslie had, and how stuff's in danger of getting lost. Leslie had won at Sundance, but Sundance didn't really foreground it in any shape or form. She, Scorsese said this is one of the, or Spike Lee, I think, and Scorsese said this is one of the most important, kind of films about New York, but yet how could you see it? We got her over with 35mm print, the only one in existence, and I think I like to think that kind of raised a bit of profile and then began to get kind of wheels in motion, and then it's that ripple effect where things can begin to get taken forward. And I think the partnership as well, the idea that organisations that do have resources open doors and say to people that are kind of bringing different kinds of voices and expertise into into kind of more public space, then begins to take somebody like Leslie Harris, who's kind of been lost in terms of kind of public discourse into kind of wider acknowledgement. Is the sort of hopefully that ripple effect that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taken her 30 years, and she's very open and outspoken about the fact that nothing's happened in 30 years, and that she didn't get the recognition she should have had. It's taken 30 years for her to be able to work on her second film. And now all of a sudden, like you said, the ripple effect is all of a sudden everyone's celebrating this film. It's like, it was right there. But also we tried to get hold of it a few years ago and couldn't, which is also sort of another issue. Our profile's grown slightly, and it's a bit annoying to think that we had to get to a certain point to be able, whether it's that film or any other film or venue or distributor, to work with us until we've reached a certain point. Because we've not changed what we're doing. It's just that more people are sort of recognising it.
And it's I guess it's how you develop, because if you go into a room saying, I'm the BFI South Bank, there's going to be more ears listening, as it were, if you're a tape collective. So it's building profile and sort of brand awareness, dare I say those words. And then that you're sort of, in quotes, taken seriously, I guess, is within the kind of wider, or that there's confidence built. I think that's the thing, is building confidence. As Ersan was saying, if you're going to go into an archive or a collector, who's the trusted sort of voice, and so it's building those partnerships.
I think the reverse of that as well was when we released After Love, Aline Khan, and then you put together that supporting season. So you can trace a sense of history into After Love.
So that's taking a new film.
Yeah, and that's taking a new film and
building
support.
Which of course is actually something we should hold, I think, in all these discussions about using the new to.
So we supported with like curating a few short films, but then it was also in line with After Love was very much sort of on brand for the other things we do, which is about mixed heritage and identity. So it was sort of perfect, and we hosted a few Q&As. Great.
Okay. Just Wendy, do you want to join us? I think we can get you a seat as well. Joined by Wendy Cook, who's head of cinema at Hyde Park and Picturehouse in Leeds.
Hey, sorry, that was a more dramatic entrance than I intended.
So just going to go around this way. So, Paul, do you want to talk about the work that GFT's been doing? I guess I'm aware that you're both a venue year-round, and also you've got various festivals, but just in the subject matter that we're talking about, just about some experiences that are about getting audiences for...
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start, actually, because there's lots from what we've been talking about that is relevant. Just taking off... Actually, I'll just start from one of the points you just made about using the new to promote the old. So I'm at GFT, I program year-round. We're a 3-screen independent cinema in Glasgow, and I've been the program manager there since 2018. And GFT is the sort of host venue for Glasgow Film Festival as well, and it's part of the same team that runs Glasgow Film Festival, but I don't work on that, so it's a separate programming team. I know them, they're nice. But yeah, so I think it's important to acknowledge, like Mark said, that I come from a place of relatively great resource. Having a festival that's been in place since 2005, which has a really strong retrospective strand led by Alan Hunter, has really raised the profile of retrospective cinema at GFT over those 15, 16, 17 years that it's been running, and sort of when I started at GFT in programming, I was in marketing before I became but when I started in programming, I sort of was aware that I was inheriting an audience that was really open and receptive to retrospective cinema. But I didn't want to take that for granted. I felt like there is more that we can give that audience. There's more that we can bring to that audience. And through the year at GFT, re-releases and reissues had been important in the program, but I think when I came on, I was like, I really want to prioritize, wherever possible, we're going to do reissues on date that they're released, and we're going to figure out how to program around them as well, like to kind of, build seasons where possible around them. And one of the, and I will come back to the point that I said I was going to start with about new, and one of the ways in which we do that at GFT is we have a kind of our own monthly strand called Cinemasters, which came out of a strand at Glasgow Film Festival, which they used in the festival just to kind of, festivals have to create strands. Like they had the Cinemasters strand at GFF for like the kind of higher profile, like auteur-driven films in the program, and we just decided in, I think, 2016, 2017, why don't we do Cinemasters year-round and use it as a way, and in that instance, to come back to that point, when we started, we were like, we'll choose a director who's got a new release, and then we'll just do 3 or 4 more of their films, and see if it works, see if people come and see them. And that, I think, for me, has been like the best way of developing a returning audience for kind of retrospective cinema at GFT year-round, every month. And it's like that word again, brand. Cinemasters has become a really recognised brand by our audience, to the point that, and sorry, Julie, if this is not welcome news, but I know like when people program their like seasons of directors and stuff, BFI, they always have really well thought out names for their seasons, like yours, from Europe to Hollywood, which is great, and there's titles and things, but often we kind of don't foreground them. We just go Cinemasters, Satyajit Ray, or Cinemasters, whoever it is, and we might be taking titles from your retrospective, but because I know that our audience knows, like, that's it, that's all they need, like that and the name of director. And then the other thing that we're really moving into now through partnership, so I worked with Invisible Women a couple of months ago on a Cinemasters strand around Polly Platt, who's not a director, but is very much a kind of key figure in cinema history. And I'm really excited about the way we can kind of take Cinemasters beyond just director, and sort of foreground these other names and less recognized names, now that the brand itself is strong enough to kind of take that and to draw an audience in on it. And that was proven. We got good numbers for those Polly Platt films that we played through June. So yeah, I suppose that's one way.
That's two. I think it's two really interesting examples of using the a sort of more localized, interpretation of work that's coming in, but also working with GFF as well. If we hold it there and then come to Wendy, because Wendy, I think you, if I'm not wrong, you've been working with a building that's not been open.
Yeah, which keeps it exciting.
Yeah.
And I think probably I feel like actually I can sit there thinking, oh gosh, I've got something to add, but actually hopefully I do, which feels like it kind of falls out of this. I think the Picturehouse, we are a single screen grade 2 listed cinema in Leeds that closed in March 2020 for a refurbishment project that then didn't get started until 2021, so 12 months of closure turned into 2.5 years and counting. I think historically Rep Cinema has had a good steady place in the Picturehouse, though it wasn't necessarily something that we had any kind of like cohesive strategy for, and actually I think the times at which it was organically kind of turned into something that was quite exciting was where people were using the facilities we had, this beautiful heritage building that brought with it kind of our brand is our is our building and our history kind of in our community. But then the facilities of twin 35mm projectors, 16mm, a projection team who were really passionate. These were the kind of things that we had to hand. And I think during kind of COVID, by not being in our building, we've not been able to kind of lean into those strengths, the physical spaces. But what we've been able to do instead is, I think, lean into sort of thinking about who is picking our programme, where is the selection happening, and who is leading on that. And I think for me is like historically the central programmer for kind of quite a long time. I think I've increasingly been recognising that I'm not the right person. Like I'm a functional programmer, and I'm good at fitting things together. But my sense of kind of rep cinema is so narrow that I think what we've started to do, and I'm kind of excited about, is instead develop that approach to programming that's sort of in parallel, expanding our internal programming team to talk about them as, for one thing, as a team that encompasses, myself, my creative engagement officer, our young audiences officer, marketing communication manager, and then cinema ops and program manager. So kind of a team of people who all have other things that we're also thinking about, but we are also thinking about program and how everything relates to audience development, to kind of people we want to work with, to the whole range of different kind of expertise. And then parallel to that, having a bigger internal programming team gives us extra capacity to work with more people outside the cinema. And that's where it kind of really gets exciting. And I think in terms of some of the rep programming that's been happening while we've been closed, that's really been working. Like, yeah, we've picked up some of the touring programmes, like the One Car Y season, which was great. But actually the stuff that I'm really proud of is things where, like, the beginning of 2022, I don't remember which year we're in, we did a great season called Power, Corruption and Lies with Pavilion, who are an art moving image organisation we work with regularly, and that was some of the best attended stuff we've done during our closure period, where they were working with really exciting sort of body of art moving image work, including people like Derek Jarman and Mona Hatoum, and kind of combining it together and bringing in their audiences and our facilities. And obviously kind of it was great. We also were able to work with T.A.P.E, which brought in lots of kind of new work, but then sat it alongside some slightly older pieces. And I think we're hoping to reopen, well, we are reopening later this year, and it's exciting that I think while we will have a bit of extra capacity to bring in more of the new release rep stuff, actually I think leaning more into that partnership working is where we're heading, and it feels like a really nice organic step for us. Hopefully. It's all quite theoretical at the moment because we don't have a building.
It sounds quite practical as well, though, that you've been delivering a programme in other venues. I mean, in a way, the venue being closed has made you work across the city in with different organisations and different venues.
Yeah, it forces you to talk about opportunities a lot, and reflection and learning and all of these exciting things, and basically not take for granted the thing that actually I realised for the previous 15 years I could take for granted, which was a really solid, stable cinema that had a history of, like a century before it, of affection for audiences. So in terms of engaging audiences with rep cinema, we had just this really long relationship with audience where they trusted us. People would turn up at the Picturehouse week in, week out and just see what was on. And actually being thrown out of that venue for good reasons, obviously we chose it, meant that we completely threw that relationship up in the air. And as much as, some people have stuck with us on the road and kind of gone out to those spaces with us, a lot of people haven't. A lot of people are literally just kind of sitting and waiting for us to reopen. So we have had to just, try things and be ready to fail kind of quite a lot, and be ready to enjoy, like small audiences and see them as wonderful. But exciting. So on that bombshell of having a venue and a programmer can limit your thinking, I'll open it up for questions if anybody wants to ask. Yep, there's a question there's a microphone coming along. Oh,
everyone here?
Yes.
Hi. This might be a question that's best for Wendy and Isra, but on that point of you sort of talking about taking films out to other sort of venues and also starting up as a newer organisation trying to find a profile. Have you had any sort of challenges, obviously with a lot of venues sort of closing down and issues with things like rents being really expensive. So like I'm thinking of recently the Abbeydale Picturehouse in Sheffield got shut down temporarily because they had a dispute with a landlord who basically was like, oh, you can't use the space anymore in it, and they had loads of stuff programmed for that period which then had to be cancelled and rescheduled and all that sort of thing. So I was just wondering, do you have challenges when you sort of confront those things when you're trying to sort of start up as a new organisation or find different venues in cities outside of these kind of more well-established spaces?
Should you?
Do you want to go first now?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so we really couldn't, it might sound really sort of cute that I'm saying that we worked in alternative spaces, but that's probably because no cinema would program us. And to be completely honest, I think people really struggled to know what we were doing. And people, I think, like venues didn't really have an interest until an escalation of the BLM movement, where people realised, actually took it seriously in terms of programming more diversely. So before that, all we were doing was sort of begging for slots. I've worked in cinemas, that's sort of what I used to do, is community cinemas and venues, so I could always ask for a favour and stuff. But actually trying to get in somewhere was really tricky. And we're now in a place where we've built relationships, but we've also sort of in a place where I've got as many demands as the venue does. I don't, just in terms of trying to keep T.A.P.E. true to its intentions and being inclusive. I know what our audience needs in terms of feeling welcome in the space. And I also know what works for T.A.P.E. So there are the sort of venues, everyone here we work with, that have made me really comfortable and that have made my audience really comfortable and who understand what we're doing, who are people I want to continue with. So we're not in a sort of place where we want to work with all cinemas everywhere. We're just slightly more particular about it, but I understand that that's a very, very, very privileged situation to be in. Because as you grow, it kind of gets to a point where you're like, well, where do you go beyond? So we're in 5 venues we like, but the next step is 10, 15. But actually, after a while, cinemas don't stand for what you stand for. There's some. So I think it's really important to sort of balancing that of like, we just need more places to work with or to screen what we're doing or to like collaborate with us. But it's also worth going where you want to be and not just anywhere basically.
I think this sort of chimes in as well. The hardest thing I found is realising I'm not in control of the space, and I'm not in control of the entire journey that the audience has to get to in front of the screen. So as much as I may want to work on access, and historically the Picturehouse had massive physical access barriers, but I understood them and I understood what my strategy was for dealing with them, and I could think about all the other things I could do about access, sort of wrapping around that. When it's not my space, I can't control that. So we're using a temporary space at the University of Leeds Students' Union, and that's one of our regular spaces. And we've put in a good team of ours, we've given them good training, we've got the marketing kind of down, but at the same time, we have transplanted ourselves into a big beast of an organisation that we can't control. We can't impact on, their values, their training, how invested their staff are or aren't in our programme. Used to be able to turn up at the Picturehouse and you always had a sense that every member of the team kind of cared about what was happening, whereas you turn up at some of the temporary spaces we're working on and you may find yourself chatting to someone at the front door who doesn't even have a clue what you're doing, doesn't care, you're just an awkward kind of interruption to the things that they've got to do more urgently. Or there's a lift down into the space, and what we've found a few times is that the lift isn't properly unlocked. So, we're advertising a certain level of physical access, but then we don't have the key to the lift. So we've got to kind of like keep checking on it. And I think knowing that basically we can't control our entire audience members' journey, and then that can lose so much trust along the way. And that's the thing that's hardest to accept, and also the thing we can least control. Apart from saying, right, this has to inform everything I do when I get back into venue, and try and kind of in the meantime figure out what are the things I can control, what can I shape, and what do I have to let go of.
Which are all really great points about the film is just one part of the journey, isn't it? I mean, it's everything around it that's before and after, and it's those contexts, I think, that are also part of it. Any more questions rather than another question? I'm sort of keen on audience participation. I might get you all to jump up and down and do that sort of thing. Just because, we're all working in this. There's a question come up that down here. But also just if there's any experiences as well from people that have had really positive experiences of taking something that was quite a kind of niche, film, a restoration, archive, and actually, your own experiences of something that was successful, and you would just want to say this worked. You equally might want to say this didn't work because of X, Y, and Z, and it'd just be good to this is a safe space, ish.
Hello, my name's Charlotte Crofts. I run the Cary Grant Festival here in Bristol, and just following on from what you were talking about, Wendy, about access, thinking about inclusion, and wondered if any of you had ever experimented with a sliding ticket scale. I know that Squiff, which is based in Glasgow, have used it, and I'm just looking at exploring it as a pilot on one of our screenings, but I'm working with multiple venue partners, and it's really complicated to get them to buy into it. So I just wondered if anyone had experienced that.
Yeah.
And also if anybody out in the stalls.
Yeah.
Experience, yeah.
So at GFT, we have worked with sliding ticket scales for partner events, like with T.A.P.E, where that's something that, it's exactly like Isra was just talking about. It's a principle that the partner sort of comes with that is essentially non-negotiable, and it's something that we want to do and explore. We're not at a place yet where we've figured out how to do that in our general program, sliding ticket scale. And it's sort of, there's various layers of discussion and figuring out whether that's right for the program or whether there's a different approach to access. And anyway, that's an aside. But yes, and I've found it really rewarding. I mean, it's great. It means you get to work with the people you really want to because you're open to doing what they want to do. And so we just figured out, from our perspective, what our minimum requirements would be for income, and then agreed a minimum guarantee with the partner that also worked for their resources. And so we've done that with T.A.P.E and Invisible Women, and we've done it with Take One Action Festival, we've done it with Squiff, we've done it with Glasgow Short Film Festival and Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival, and more and more it will continue. And I feel like, from my perspective as the kind of, with my sort of responsible for the venue's overall staying afloat kind of thing, the program sort of washing its face, if you like, I feel really confident when a partner is like, this is what we do and this is what our audience needs. I'm like, then great, let's do that. Because that's all I really need. If I trust them that that's going to work, then brilliant, let's do it.
Wendy?
Yeah, I think very much the same. I've realised I don't need this, do I?
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I think very much the same thing, like certain partners. We're doing it really regularly on our family-friendly programming. We've instituted that while we've been closed and tend to bring it back into venue. Also with some regular partners, like say Pavilion, we've been doing them with all their screenings for the last couple of years. I think one interesting thing we're trying to work out as we go back into venue is, for some people there is something slightly stressful about pay as you feel, like they just want to have a price, just tell us what it costs and we'll know. So how do we put some text around it that helps make it a bit more, again, transparent? Leeds Queer Film Festival, similar to Squiff, have a similar consistent sliding scale for all their things, and I really like how they talk about it in relation to choosing a kind of price alongside what is your kind of day-to-day existence, what is your reality versus what is this ticket. And I'm interested in that, but I don't think we've quite cracked it yet.
I think it would be, at South Bank, we felt that our demographic was really starting to age. So we put together a plan to really target young people, and we put in a £3 price point for under 25s. And at first, you could only come on the day and kind of use the unused inventory. But now we allow them to book ahead, and I have to say it is really, it's really kick-started kind of young people attending at South Bank.
And is that across the spectrum of the programme?
It is.
Yeah.
Probably not the kind of premium special events, unless there's unsold tickets, but it is across the spectrum of the programme.
But yeah, so in terms of film-wise, it's all, it's the archive restoration
It's
work
everything.
as well. It's everything.
Yeah.
It's just kind of coming
Yeah.
into the...
Yeah.
Anybody... Yep.
Sorry.
Annie?
Again. Just
Oh, wait, if you just wait for the mic, Annie. It's coming along.
Just to say, I mean, the Africa Eye Festival is just an annual festival, very small, once a year in November. And in terms of what Charlotte's just asked, one of the things several of the things that we do is we have a Pay It Forward, which we started 2-3 years ago. And we've had a gradual take-up on that, and that's been felt really positive, actually. We set aside a number of tickets for refugees, and we also put out social media for just saying if people want to come but can't afford it, let's see what we can do. So keeping it as open as possible and as inclusive as possible. And in terms of diversity, I think that's really important. And it kind of works. And I mean, for our screenings here at Watershed, we have a student price as well as concessions, and that works pretty well too. And it's just a question of balancing up, how much you need to take to wash your face, as it were, and how much, great if you can make a profit, but actually the important thing is to get bums on seats and people watching the films. So for us, all those things have worked pretty well.
Thank you. Any other... whoever the mic goes to has got to ask a question. Oh, there's a question at the back, so if you can get it up there, the mic up there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jack from Park Circus. I was just wondering how much you all pay attention to what your local multiplexes might be doing, and whether repertory can be something that you've maybe even developed in order to differentiate yourselves, maybe even post-pandemic, in the way there's been a lot of chat to diversify programming generally, which may be more of a question for Wendy and Paul, but I'd be interested in Isra as well, whether you would be keen to see titles that you're bringing to the public be shown in multiplexes and receive 100 site footprints, or whether that might dilute a little bit what you're doing, for example. I'm just wondering how much attention you pay to what they're doing and how you try and differentiate yourselves, especially looking at repertory cinema.
It's good. It's a good question.
But I mean, as you know, Jack, we've got a big Cineworld, the biggest in Europe, just down the road from GFT, 18-screen cinema. So I always pay attention to what they're playing. But it's an interesting sort of flow of audience between the two of us. Just because something is playing there, that's not necessarily a threat to the GFT program, because there's an audience that wants to come to GFT to see the film. But it's an interesting question around rep cinema. I think, in terms of the films that Park Circus are re-releasing, there are ones where, to me, it's kind of obvious that it should be in the multiplex. Like you did First Blood recently. And, the kind of really high-profile... And I think this is one thing I was thinking. I think, like, streaming and sort of the incredible availability of everything for people to watch sort of whenever they want has increased the appetite for seeing old favourites in the cinema, because people have sort of learned to love rewatching in a way that wasn't really possible before. And so all that's great for rep in the cinema, but it also means that we can't actually do everything that people want, and there definitely are titles that fit better in the multiplex for a run than a kind of one-off show at GFT or 2 screenings, So I think, there's a balance. For me, it's always on a case-by-case basis, so I wouldn't make a blanket, because I wouldn't be delighted to see everything that we play of your reissues playing at the same time at Cineworld. I think that would be a bit tough, although I don't think there's any danger in that when they're playing Top Gun on 17 of their 18 screens.
Would T.A.P.E Collective be interested in, if the doors were open, in a multiplex environment of going in through that route?
Sure. What I was going to say is sometimes I can't tell the difference between an independent cinema and a multiplex. Where I live, I don't think there is a really sort of like Watershed, which is like completely independent. I'm surrounded by Picturehouses and an Odeon, and I have been going to the Odeon recently. If they, it's just a completely different environment, and I sort of always go on about that Odeon because it's been there a really long time, and every time I go it's just packed with kids, and it just makes me think of, this is a sort of thing we're all trying to do, and we can't figure it out. We're all trying to get 16-year-olds in at 3 p.m. straight after school, and we're unable to do it. So if Odeon's got it figured out, then who are we to sort of think that we're better than them? But yeah, if it was something like, there's Odeon that does like art house and sort of global cinema in a different way, which my experience, and certainly experience of partners that we've worked with in terms of getting into the multiplexes, is really difficult, because finding the right person to talk to can be really difficult. Now, Julie, I'm not going to put you in the spot at all, or the BFI. It may well be somebody else, but the BFI are doing the partnership with View, which is getting films into the heart of the commercial beast, as it were. And I just wonder, does that
mean people come?
No, listen. I'm old enough to know BFI Odeon, and people didn't go. But there is an idea that in that mainstream context is where is a sort of is the ultimate goal, as it were, because there you get a kind of popular audience and you introduce stuff, And I just sort of wonder, is there as you have opened the doors to T.A.P.E Collective, for example, is there a sort of opening of that door? I mean, it's a question for elsewhere, but I just thought about it. Actually, is there using that slot to do something that is about a kind of broader remit? I mean, I'm just putting that out there. I'm not expecting necessarily an answer, but something
we've
to think about.
started in a small way.
Yeah.
So let's hope it develops.
Yeah.
The Harder They Come is playing in like 90 of their screens.
Right.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of how that might develop. Because I mean, if just another girl in the IRT kind of gets a sort of bigger release, you think, well, if we're building audiences, if we're developing audiences, then there's, and we are the people. I would think, and I'm glad Jack brought in the commercial mainstream, because it is how we sit alongside. Yeah,
we're trying to eventize it as well by always having an introduction.
Yeah.
Whether it's from talent or a curator, just to give it a bit more oomph.
Yeah. Also, just to add that currently T.A.P.E has a season which got support from Film Feels Curious, which looks at curious source material, but the films are Magic Mike XXL, Hustlers and Zola, and you can say whatever you want about the sort of topics and themes and the studios behind it, but ultimately what we're trying to do is reframe the conversation around the films. There's a lot to be said about who consumes pop culture and how do we judge those people, and so after the screenings we host pop quizzes, and the number of Gen Z kids that are like around the answer sheet trying to get the answers right for these pop quizzes about Succession, and the questions are about everything that's sort of trivia related. It's really exciting, and they're engaging with it, and so
that's a really interesting point, and actually it's probably a whole other panel discussion, not with us, not with me anyway, about how young people are finding out information. And I say that because, and I hope Steph doesn't mind, who's sat over there, who's is the assistant in the cinema department, is also doing an MA in curation. But when Curzon announced that they were doing the Wim Wenders retrospective, the recent retrospective, I just thought to myself, not again. For God's sake, it's just happening. Surely they were just released a couple of years back. And Steph, who's young, said to me, I'd love to see Wings of Desire on the big screen. I'd love to see, and I thought, So I thought about it from my old jaundiced, grumpy, miserable self, and thought, and Wings of Desire, we screened over the weekend and was our highest grossing film for that weekend. We've got Paris, Texas coming up, and it is that thing about, it's just an illustrative story of me not listening to my own prejudices.
And when you think about your marketing materials as well, that's really important to try and focus more on a younger audience with new trailer. New poster.
Well, and that's where the poster for that we've done for Cinema Rediscovered, which I'm very pleased with the design that they came up. Hopefully that's got some it's that thing about how it was might get told off, but it was a black and white image which we've jazzed up. You know what I mean? But hopefully that's part of that. I'm aware of time, and if any last question. We will continue the conversations. I'm absolutely sure that's the idea over lunch. But I'd like to thank the panel very much. Thank you.